Welcome to our channel. We hope you enjoy the video. Don't forget to subscribe to receive the latest notifications. Today, I will introduce you to a true story about a disaster. Parasite in the ear, the path to death. Jack sat curled up in the corner of his room, clutching his head tightly. It had been 3 days since he started hearing a strange hissing sound in his left ear, nothing like the usual ringing he sometimes experienced after long nights of working. It sounded more like a tiny insect crawling through the narrow crevices of his skull, occasionally accompanied by an itchy sensation as if something was moving inside. At first, Jack thought it was just an illusion caused by work stress. He was a freelance programmer, often glued to his computer screen until morning in his tiny apartment on the outskirts of Sydney. But by the third night, when the hissing sound grew clearer, almost rhythmic, he knew something was wrong. He turned on his desk lamp, grabbed a small mirror, and tilted his head to inspect his ear. The weak yellow light from the lamp shone into his ear canal, but there was nothing unusual. No swelling, no redness, no sign of an insect or foreign object. Jack sighed in relief, telling himself that maybe he just needed some rest. But as soon as he put the mirror down, the hissing sound returned, louder this time, as if something inside was trying to scream. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling stained with yellowish patches, while the sound buzzed in his head. Near dawn, as the first rays of sunlight crept through the blinds, he felt a sudden sharp pain behind his left ear. Not just any pain, this was a piercing stab, as if someone had jabbed a needle into his flesh. Jack jolted upright, letting out a short scream, clutching his ear. When he pulled his hand away, his fingertips were smeared with bright red blood. The next morning, Jack decided to visit a clinic. He couldn't endure another night of the noise and pain. The ENT, ear, nose, and throat clinic in downtown Sydney was packed. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the coughs of other patients made him even more uneasy. When it was finally his turn, he was greeted by Dr. Thomas, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a deep, steady voice. Jack explained everything: the hissing, the itching, the pain, and the blood. Dr. Thomas listened carefully, nodding occasionally, before using a small otoscope to examine Jack's ear. After a few moments of silence, he frowned, turned off the light, and sat down. "Your ear doesn't show signs of a typical infection," he said, his voice tinged with concern. "But there is a small scratch deep inside your ear canal. Do you remember doing anything that could have caused it?" Jack shook his head. He hadn't used cotton swabs or anything sharp. He lived alone and didn't have a habit of leaving his windows open for insects to fly in. Dr. Thomas nodded thoughtfully, jotting down a few notes in his medical log before handing Jack a prescription for eardrops and antibiotics. "This could be a minor wound that got irritated. Use these for a few days, and if it doesn't improve, come back." He paused, looking Jack directly in the eye. "And remember, don't try to check or poke inside your ear. If something is in there, you might make it worse." The whispering parasite. Jack shuddered at the doctor's warning. "There's something inside." The phrase lingered in his mind all the way home. He reassured himself that it was just the doctor's way of speaking, nothing serious. But as night fell, the hissing sound returned, this time accompanied by a new sensation. Something was moving inside. That night, Jack had a strange dream. He found himself standing in a dark forest in the Blue Mountains, where dry, brittle branches intertwined like a giant web. There was no wind, no birdsong, only the hissing sound, the same one in his ear, now echoing through the vast silence. He walked forward, searching for a way out, but every step brought him closer to a deep, bottomless pit in the middle of the forest. Peering inside, he saw a swarm of tiny, black, glossy insects emerging from the depths. They had thin wings and spindly legs, crawling over each other in a writhing mass. Then, as if sensing his presence, they suddenly took flight, all at once, rushing toward him. Jack woke up with a gasp, drenched in sweat. The hissing in his ear was louder than ever. He switched on the light, rushed to the bathroom, and stared into the mirror. This time he saw it, something tiny and black, wriggling at the edge of his ear canal. He screamed and tried to swipe it away, but it disappeared instantly, as if retreating deeper inside. The next morning, Jack didn't go to the clinic. He was afraid the doctor would find something horrifying, or worse, find nothing and think he was insane. Instead, he went online searching for every possible piece of information about bugs in the ear and parasites. He read terrifying accounts. A man in India who had a cockroach crawl into his ear while he slept, a child in the US who had a spider living in his ear canal for months. But none of them were like him. None described something living inside them that hissed. By the 5th day, Jack couldn't take it anymore. The pain had spread to the back of his head, accompanied by sudden bouts of dizziness. He rushed back to the clinic, practically begging Dr. Thomas for a deeper examination. This time, the doctor agreed to perform an X-ray and an endoscopic ear exam. The results left both Jack and Dr. Thomas speechless. On the screen, they saw a tiny, elongated creature, only a few millimeters long, moving inside Jack's ear canal. It looked like a worm, but was thinner, with minuscule legs running along its body. Dr. Thomas muttered, "This is impossible. This isn't a normal insect." He immediately called in a parasitology expert. As Jack sat on the chair, trembling, he felt it moving. This was no hallucination. It was real. It was alive inside his head. 30 minutes later, a specialist named Cera arrived. She examined the endoscopic footage, then turned to Jack with a grave expression. "This is not a normal insect," she said. "It might be a rare parasitic species that usually thrives in soil or contaminated water. Do you recall any unusual encounters with nature recently?" Jack searched his memory. Then it hit him. Last week, he had gone camping with some friends in the Blue Mountains near a small creek. That night, he had slept outdoors, close to the water. Could it have entered his ear while he slept? Cera nodded. "If my suspicions are correct, this could be a mutated strain of cordyceps, a fungus that normally infects insects, but in rare cases, it can invade human hosts. And Jack, it's not just living in your ear. It's trying to reach your brain." What followed was a nightmare. Jack was hospitalized in a major Sydney hospital, but removing the parasite proved nearly impossible. It had burrowed deeper, its laying eggs in his ear canal and spreading to the soft tissue behind it. Doctors tried medication, but the parasite was strangely resistant. Every time they thought they had killed it, the hissing sound returned, louder, angrier. And Jack began to change. He became irritable, prone to sudden bursts of anger, sometimes muttering incoherent words. One night, he awoke in his hospital room, standing in front of the mirror, whispering strange phrases he didn't understand. He felt it inside him, controlling him, piece by piece. Cera, the only one who truly grasped the parasite's danger, proposed a final option: brain surgery. But the risk was enormous. The parasite had dug too deep. Operating on it could kill Jack instantly. Jack refused. He didn't want to die like a lab experiment. Instead, he asked to go home. On his last night, Jack sat alone in his apartment, staring out the window. The hissing was no longer just a sound. It was a voice, whispering words he couldn't comprehend. Yet they filled him with an eerie sense of peace. He knew he didn't have much time left. The parasite had won. It had taken over his body, his thoughts, his very essence. The next morning, Jack was found dead on his apartment floor, his eyes wide open, his lips curled into a grotesque smile. From his ear, a cluster of tiny parasites wriggled out, scattering across the floor, like they had fulfilled their purpose. Jack's story spread online, a grim warning about the hidden horrors lurking in Australia's wilderness. But no one knew the truth. Out there, deep in the forests of the Blue Mountains, thousands more parasites waited, searching for their next host.